welcome everyone to We Are Triathletes webinar series. And today I'm so excited to have Jeff Galloway back with us. Jeff is an Olympian, and he is also the creator of the RunWalkRun program. That's an international program. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Jeff Galloway. Welcome.
Well, Hilary, I'm very pleased to be here.
So talk to us a little bit about the RunWalkRun program. Is it for, well, first let's start off. Is it for everyone? And years ago, you had a little bit of a different philosophy than you do now in terms of walking 1 minute as opposed to walking 30 seconds. So if you can address both of those questions, that would be awesome.
The beginning of Run, Walk, Run in my teaching career about running occurred in 1974 when I taught a beginning running class. And I discovered that even though we had some beginning runners that ended up being fast by the end of the class, most of them were not fast. But even the fast runners found that they ran faster with Run, Walk, Run than they did when they ran nonstop. And that surprised the heck out of me. I really did not expect that at all. So I started tracking the data. And now I have heard back from over 500,000 people who I've given advice to about Run, Walk, Run, and who have gotten back to me to find out how it works. So tabulating the results, I can tell you that it works for practically anybody that runs. And the main reason here was unveiled to me in a book called Story of the Human Body, written by an evolutionary biologist who believes, as do other anthropologists that study ancient man, that we were not designed to run nonstop for long distances. Now, we were designed to walk day and night, night and day. We are long distance walkers by design. We can run in short segments. The experts believe that our ancestors ran in short segments, and this is what helped them survive. However, as you increase the length of a run, on any run, you put a lot of stress on your weak links, your joints, the feet, the legs, and of course the heat buildup that is a weak link and shuts people down and can cause death. And I'm against death. And so, I'm going to tell you what I found out. Now, after analyzing the Run, Walk, Run amounts about 10 years ago, it was clear that the maximum benefit for most people in a walk break occurs within the first 30 seconds of a walk break. But here's the clincher. When people do 1 minute walk breaks, during the second half of a half marathon or longer event or long run, you're going to tend to slow down progressively, and it becomes harder and harder to restart again. So our whole evolution of Run, Walk, Run is based on facts. It's based on the reports of people who have had success with certain ratios, and the 30-second walk break is the maximum we find beneficial.
So you can actually do 15-second walk break, 5-second walk break. I mean, or is it really the most beneficial to do the 30 seconds, or does it depend on the person?
There is no magic amount when it comes to very short walk segments. Or run segments, actually. I have a number of folks that I train for Disney events on my e-coaching program, and a number of people who read my Getting Started book, and the older books have the older ratios in there, and they come back to me and say, I tried these shorter segments and they're working a whole lot better. So the whole concept here is that you have to try them out and find out what works best for you. But I have clients who were trying to stay ahead of the balloon ladies at the Disney races and were not successful using a conventional amount of, say, 15, 15, or even run 15 and walk 30. And when they went down to 5 seconds, 7 seconds, or 10 seconds, followed by a 30-second walk break, they speeded up and actually stayed ahead of the balloon ladies. And there are a whole lot of other success stories in other situations that way. So what I suggest is doing some race pace segments for time 1 day a week. And I usually program that into a Tuesday workout after doing an easy warm-up and then a series of the drills, the cadence drill and the acceleration glider drill, then moving into a series of quarter miles or half miles run at the pace that you want to run in your next race, whatever that race is. And then on each one of those quarter miles or half miles, try a different run, walk, run. For example, let's say that you want to run a 12-minute per mile pace in your next race. Well, and you decide in your race pace segments that you're going to do a quarter mile. Well, for a 12-minute per mile pace, we're talking a 3-minute quarter mile time. So your goal is to run 3 minutes on that quarter mile time. And on the first one, you might try 60-30. On the second one, you might try 30-15, and then maybe 40-20. And as you go through the season, you can keep changing up the amounts of running, amounts of walking. And a lot of people run 12-minute pace with a 15-15, 20-20, or 30-30, or even the new one that is becoming very popular is to run 20 seconds and walk 25.
What's interesting is that I have runners who run 12 seconds and run 12 seconds, walk 25, and do an 11-minute mile pace. I've got other runners who are doing a 7 or 8-minute mile pace, and they're running 2 minutes, 30 seconds. So it's interesting how that works. And I find that sometimes when you're doing a shorter distance of running, you're actually running faster.
That's correct.
How can that be?
Well, first of all, it's more invigorating when you go down in the amount you're running. It's more invigorating to be able to run fast, because instead of settling into a long, slow pace, you get a chance to have a quicker burst. And that does turn on some of those energizing circuits in the brain. And so you're going to feel better. But that faster pace on the running segment results often in a faster time overall.
Now, some of my runners, they fight me on the 5-second run, 30-second walk. They're like, oh, this is ridiculous. It's not really running. And then at the end of the workout, of course, everybody's in a sweat. Can you talk a little bit about that and the benefit of going easier on these long runs?
Yeah, the bottom line on a long run, and this is the most important point that anyone listening can get out of this. The most important thing on a long run is to cover the distance, and you will get the same endurance even if you walk the entire distance. So then when we're trying to set up a strategy of run, walk, run on a given long run, we're going to look at individuals' capability. And the last thing we want to do is have our runners leave that long run or finish up the long run either with aches or pains or exhaustion or puking. We're against all of those things. And so what we're doing is trying to find the right amount, just the right amount of running, followed by the amount of walking that keeps that person away from those negative things. And we have found that, especially on a hot day, that the real short amounts of running will maintain all of the running adaptations, but will lower heat buildup and will also lower the damage on the aches and pains, as well as lower the use of the muscle that can cause long-term fatigue.
So talk to us a little bit about athlete training for an Ironman event or a half Ironman event. A lot of the, people in the group are training for that. Is it beneficial to use the run, walk, run method?
Well, in most of the cases, when I have trained triathlete, I found not just beneficial, it's absolutely imperative, because let's face it, when you're training for a triathlon, it's like a second job. I mean, you are putting in a whole lot of work almost every single day, and the workload is much higher level than that for a marathon. And it just puts a lot of stress in other areas of your life also. If you try to rush through a run, you're going to add to the lingering fatigue that you may never get rid of between long runs. It carries over into your cycle and into your long swims and so forth. So backing way off on the run, walk, run when you're training for a triathlon is just really a smart idea. Because again, it doesn't matter how slow you go, but the faster you go on a long run, the longer it's going to take to recover, and the greater the chance of injury.
I want to talk a little bit about injury. Should you run if you have an injury, or if you feel like a nagging ache during the run?
Most of the people that I have worked with, and we're talking well over 10,000 individuals over the last 45 years who have been injured when they came to me, most of them have been able to continue running even while the injury heals up. But there are two caveats here. The first one is that you need to get the healing started. And usually what that means is take 3 to 5 days off of anything that could irritate that injured site, and then treat it and continue that treatment mode to get that injury healed. But in terms of the running portion, you really want to back off the intensity. On long runs, just walk, because walking is very unlikely to trigger any further damage to an injured site, a running injury. But walking the length of the long run will still give you all of the endurance of that long run. So you just walk the long ones. And then on your other runs, it becomes tricky, but the guiding principle is to stay below the threshold of further irritation. And each individual is going to be doing different things. Even those who may have had the same ability level and the same injury have individual issues and are going to require a different run, walk, run in order to stay below the threshold of further irritation. When in doubt, you'd simply walk even on the short runs. But once the person can do some form of running, such as even 5 to 10 seconds followed by a 30-second walk break, it is going to be better to get back into shape after the injury completely heals if you can have some sort of a ratio like that, a real gentle ratio.
That's a great point. Talk to us a little bit now. Now the summer is coming. We're pretty much in spring, I guess, springtime around the country. It's going to start getting warmer significantly. What type of hydration do you suggest drinking during these long runs? And I'm talking about anything over a half marathon, up to an ultra and triathlon.
The first principle here is that the most important time to hydrate is the 36 hours before a long run or a long race. And I say that because you're not going to be able to replenish the fluid you lose when you run. So here is the deal. the days before, and particularly the 36-hour before, you want to have about 8 to 12 8-ounce glasses of water during that 36-hour period. Obviously, don't wake up in the middle of the night to drink, but you do need to drink during your waking hours, approximately every hour and a half to 2 hours. Just keep sipping on a container of fluid so that you will accomplish that 8 times 8 ounces throughout a given day. And then the day before to have 4 glasses at least during the second half of that day. Okay, so the other thing to avoid the day before are 2 substances. One is salt and the other is alcohol, because those 2 things, the day and particularly the afternoon or evening before, are going to leave you dehydrated at the start of those long runs and long races. And you're just going to get further and further into dehydration debt when you start out dehydrated at the beginning. Now, during first of all, when you wake up long run or race morning, my recommendation is to drink a glass of water or a cup of coffee if you're like me and you like to have your coffee. And then that's it. That's all you would be consuming in fluid until the event or the run starts. And after the run starts, my rule of thumb, which has been very successful, is 2 to 4 ounces of water with the sugar, blood sugar boost that you need, which is 30 to 40 calories of sugar. Now, the bottom line here is that when you run, you really don't get much blood flow to the gut because the blood flow is needed in a whole lot of other areas. And on a hot day, the cruel irony is that there's even going to be less blood that goes to the gut. So it doesn't help you to be drinking more and more and more as it gets hotter. As a matter of fact, that can induce a dangerous condition called hyponatremia, which can cause death. And I'm against death. So, we want to stay away from that. So staying with this rule of 2 to 4 ounces can keep you within the range of what can be absorbed, with a little extra to wash the waste products out in the kidneys, and without overdoing it.
With the run, walk, run, I'm going to go back to that. A lot of people feel, even like when I said, I was talking a little bit about the 5:30, right? 5 seconds run, 30-second walk. People are against it. They fight me on it. How do you get beyond that ego in your head? Because I know I get that too. When I go out and I just want to do like a very light, easy run, that 5:30, I think, oh, this is ridiculous. I got to do something a little bit more than that. Can you talk a little bit about that ego that you've got in your going on?
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, and the folks that I work with over the years, to see somebody who I started working with as a bare beginner, who came right off the couch and literally could not run a block. I mean, they might get a third of the way down the block and they were out of breath and felt like they were going to have a heart attack. Fortunately, they found the Galloway program and we were able to set them up with the right amount of running and walking. So let's take an example that occurred to me recently. One of these runners who had started out with 5 seconds 30, and by the way, was fine with that when they started out. A year later, I hadn't talked to this person for, at least 6 months, and they had continued to progress, and they fell in with a friend who was doing 3-in-1. Run 3 minutes and walk 1. Well, we're still talking only 1 year into their running career. And so she came to me because she was having some aches and pains and wasn't able to finish her runs. So I said, first question, which is always my first question, what strategy you've been using for run, walk, run? And she told me. And I said, well, you're not ready for that. And she said, well, my friend is, and we're on the same level. Well, you know, the fallacy there is no two people are on the same level. There are all types of differences genetically and other things. So that was not an excuse or a reason that I could latch on to, except to tell her that she was wrong there. But the bottom line was what was happening to her. She was getting aches and pains, and she was hitting the wall and had to walk in. And so I said, you know, you need to go back and start over again. And then as you move forward, you can find the right run, walk, run. But I guarantee for you, it's not going to be 3 in 1. And she fought me on that. And then when I came back to her aches and pains, which had become quite significant, and she was headed for a very serious injury in her knee, she agreed to give it a try. But in her case, as is the case that you're dealing with, Hilary, there are a lot of people who, because of heat, because of the aches and pains they're having, because of something that happened to them like a sickness or something, they really have to be back in baby steps of 5 seconds running, 30 seconds of walking. Now, the ego thing relates to letting the ancient subconscious brain be in control over the running, and we often do that. And so what the individual has to realize is that individual is battling against the ego, which is lodged in this ancient brain. And if you have a strategy, then you can activate your human brain, which overrides the ancient brain, and then you're not battling with that ego anymore. Now, the strategies start with mantras. I'm walking at this ratio because it works. I'm walking at 5:30 because I don't want to hurt like I've been hurting. I'm walking at this ratio so I won't hit the wall like I've been hitting the wall. All of these are cognitive thoughts. They are real thoughts, and they're logical. So they're going to activate the human brain. And as soon as you do that, you override that subconscious brain, and it's not propelling you on to do something or to question what you're doing. You're just latching on cognitively to whatever it is that you're doing for the next few minutes. And then you have to keep reiterating those cognitive tools, the mantras, the affirmation of your run, walk, run, and why you're doing that, and then any other positive thought that you can have that's going to keep you latched on to the cognitive way of thinking.
We have about 10 more minutes. Thank you, Jeff. And I'd like to open this up to the group that's with us today. So if you have questions, let me know and I will unmute your mic. There's a chat box on the side that you could just type in and let me know, or just wave to me. I don't know if anybody's, let's see. I'm going to unmute. Okay. I don't know if you have a question. Hi.
I'm formulating one. Good morning, Jeff. Good morning, Hilary.
Good morning.
So I am in the beginning stages of preparing for my first 100-mile race. And I've been using different versions of run walking for all the previous distances I've been able to do, including the half marathon trail, full marathon trail, then 50K. Then I went to 100K last year and ran into a little medical trouble, but other than that, had a really good experience. So now I'd like to try that 100-mile. Do you have any advice in the run walk method for the longer distances where you have, because of the way the races are run, the time cutoffs are a little bit tight for someone like myself who's run walking?
Well, in fact, I've tracked a lot of folks doing the ultras who've tried it both ways, more run nonstop and then much less run nonstop. And the much less run, walk, run tends to produce faster times. So it's a fallacy to think that Run, Walk, Run is going to slow you down, particularly in those long events. It saves your resources so that you're not walking continuously at the end. That will slow you down. So with that in mind, what has been your best half marathon in the last year or so?
For road, that's been around 2 hours and 14 minutes because I was injured.
Okay. So you're training for the 100-miler.
Yes.
And what pace per mile do you have to maintain in that to stay in the race?
I just wrote it down. If I want to finish in 29 hours and 50 minutes for 100 miles, the average pace is 17:54. The average amount of miles per hour is 3.35.
Okay. What you want to do is do some race rehearsals on your short runs to determine a 17-minute pace and what the least amount of running you could do that would maintain that pace. My guess is that we're talking about between 5 and 10 seconds of running and 30 seconds of walking, just like we were just talking then. Although I will tell you that may still be too much, not enough walking. So you may need to do more walking than that, especially in the beginning. And you may need to get up to 5 to 10 seconds of running and a minute of walking or 50 seconds of walking. You'll see. You'll be able to try that out. Now, on your long ones, do you have a copy of my trail running book?
I don't, but it sounds like I'm about to.
Well, the trail running book not only has all types of drills and techniques for running trails and training for that, but it has the training programs for ultra marathons as well as 5K, 10K, half and full. So it has 50K, 100K, 50-mile and 100-mile training programs. Now, what I found productive after training quite a few ultra marathoners is that ultra marathon training is more about having a long weekend of running segments in which you have no more than 4 hours in between each running segment. So you don't get a full night's sleep on those long weekends. And what that means is that with the up to 4 hours of break between a 12 to 17-mile run, walk, run segment, for example, you're not going to be fully refreshed in 4 hours of rest, but you do get enough to spend a little time with family and do some errands, and you can still have a life on those long weekends. And so, as you'll see in the trail running book, over the period of time that leads up to the goal race weekend, you are gradually increasing the number of mileage on these segments, again with no more than 4 hours of rest in between. Now, these segments could be done walking only. Again, they can be done just walking, because all you're trying to do is get those miles on your feet and legs. And any way you get those, you will have that level of endurance.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Just either wave or... Okay, hold on a minute. Let me just unmute Paul. There you go, Paul.
All right. So, Jeff, let me just say I tuned in. I've been doing marathons and Ironman for a long time. I started 25 years ago.
Right.
And I actually used your book to run my first marathon. That was 66 marathons ago.
Yes.
In fact, at that time, you were advocating running longer than a marathon in order to be able to do a marathon. I still remember in my first training session, I was running and I had run to that. I don't know, I'd run from Port Washington and Glen Cove, and I got lost, and I asked how I got back, and somebody looked at me like I was crazy that you couldn't cover that distance on foot. So I've been doing a lot of marathons. I noticed you sort of go into the run walk and not towards that view of doing a longer, the longer distance. And I know that there's sort of a movement afoot for sure. I know there's a group that says now that you can train for marathon with 9-mile long runs. I was wondering what you thought of that today in terms of the length of a long run for marathon.
Well, you are mistaken, because I still advocate the long runs of at least 26 to finish, and then 29 miles to run a time goal. So that's something that has not changed since my original book. In terms of the length of the long run, we've done a lot of research on that, and we found that a person tends to hit the wall in a marathon somewhere around the length of their long run. So it just really depends on where you want to hit the wall. I believe, as do most of the people that I coach, that they would rather hit the wall just after 26.2 miles in the marathon. And the best way I found to do that is to get that long run up to at least 26 miles, even better, longer than that.
And with the half marathon, you still recommend 14 and then what, 17 for a time goal?
Yes, 14 miles to finish a half marathon has been a magic distance. And we've had so many people that used to poop out and not be able to finish half marathons with 10 miles or less, who once they get up to 14 have no trouble whatsoever in finishing the half marathon. For a time goal, the maximum for benefit is up around 19. Now, the reality is that most people don't want to get that high when they're training for a half marathon, and they will compromise a little bit on their performance potential by dropping back to 17 or 16 or even 15. But to get the maximum, it's always better to go up to 19.
Wow, that's awesome. Any other questions before we wrap up? I'll just quickly unmute a couple of you guys who have not. See anybody? All right. If there's no other questions, I want to thank Jeff. Oh, one more question. Hold on. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
All right. So since I do Ironman, which the marathon for an Ironman, it seems to be a much different animal than a marathon. The marathon being standalone, and if you're in reasonably good shape, you can kind of do it. The Ironman marathon tends to be very challenging. Obviously, a lot of people totally conk out in an Ironman where they don't conk out in a marathon. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts for the Ironman marathon.
Yes, I've had really good results in training people for Ironman triathlons, and I also gave a coaching clinic for USA Triathlon a couple of years back, and I had dozens of the coaches come up to me afterwards and say how beneficial it was to, one, use extremely liberal run, walk, run amounts with mostly walking and less running on the long runs, or to walk the entire distance of the long run. So the key is to not totally destroy yourself with exhaustion by running too hard on the long runs. The second key in an Ironman triathlon itself is when you get off the bike, do a walk to get the muscles reset and ready to start running, and then to do liberal amounts of walking at first with short amounts of running, and gradually transition into what works best for you. This is another example where the race pace segments can allow you to find that ratio that's going to work best for you at the pace you expect to run in an Ironman triathlon marathon.
Do you think that we should always, our goal should always be a negative split on all runs?
On long runs, it's not that necessary, and I say that mainly because in a lot of long runs during the summer particularly, the heat is going to go up, and so you should be slowing down. So you should have a positive split when it comes to heat. You should also have a positive split if you're starting to get some aches and pains in a weak link area. So the key then is to slow that long run down enough so that you can do the distance and not have things that linger afterwards. So I wouldn't be preoccupied about getting a negative split on the long runs.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I'm going to wrap this up. I very much appreciate Jeff's time today. So thank you, and thank you all for coming and joining us. And we'll be putting this up on YouTube so you could view it again. And for those who were not with us, we're sorry, but we hope you listen to it. Thank you again, Jeff. One last thing is, if anybody needs to, get in touch with you, Jeff, or if they want to, join Team Galloway Long Island, which is the running arm to WeRTriathletes, you can email me. Jeff, do you want to just give your contact information on your website?
Absolutely, Hilary. You conduct a really fun program. I really enjoyed coming up last year and running with the group, and hope to do that again. For contact information, go to jeffgalloway.com. We have a lot of information up there. You can find out where our groups are by clicking on training programs and then your locality. And we also have a number of running schools and wonderful running retreats in Carmel, California, Lake Tahoe, the Panhandle Beach area of Florida, and our running schools are all over the country. They're 3-hour duration, and I will load you up with the information that you need because the questions allow for individualization. So I look forward to seeing y'all on the road, and our next running school is going to be in Atlanta on April 28th. If any of you are in that area, I'd love to see you in my hometown.
That's awesome. Thank you again, Jeff. We really appreciate your time. Have a good day. Have a good day, everyone.